Hey, can I ask you a question? Do you like playing with your meat? Maybe getting a little frisky? How about a little pain? Boy, you better take those filthy hands off that show, because we're just getting... Oh, God! Alright guys, Scorn is pretty goddamn gnarly. In a great way. And now that I've gone through the entire game, I'm pretty confident that I know what's going on. So before we get into the explanation of the story, let me just tell you my theory. And after the explanation, we can wrap it all up and piece it together. So my theory is, Scorn is played on an alien world. This alien civilization went down a different path when it came to technology, and as you can probably guess, that's biomechanics, meaning genuine, living, breathing machines. Now, in order to make this happen, my guess is that they created a virus that could construct and deconstruct on a molecular level. Now, around the time of this game, they also figured out a way to ascend to a higher dimension. During this gameplay, the virus is accidentally released by a desperate humanoid trying to catch up with everyone else. With no way to keep things in check, the virus quickly expands, engulfing the entirety of what I like to call the meat factory. Now, this game takes place through the eyes of not one, but two protagonists. As I explain the story, it'll make sense, but I feel the need to let you know to take away from the confusion. So in the beginning, we go from protagonist 1 releasing the virus to the second protagonist just trying to ascend with everyone else. Now, with that small explanation out of the way, we can begin the story. Starting immediately from the main menu, you awaken stuck to the ground. Pulling yourself free, you crawl towards structures erected in the distance. Flashing back and forth to a different time and place, mirroring your actions, you crawl across a wasteland towards a giant building in the distance. Under you, the ground gives way and you fall into a chasm. Awakening, you begin exploring. You wander around through the hallways until you come across a curious machine. This machine very carefully implants a device into your arm that allows you to interact with your surroundings. Making your way through what we'll call the meat factory, you realize you need another person to open the way forward. Without another living soul nearby, you do the next best thing. You solve some puzzles by selecting a semi-humanoid that's ripe and ready for dismemberment. Remember, this is normal here, so everything is biomechanical. Makes sense that you would have a meat farm. I mean, just take a look at it. It's not alive. It doesn't have a conscience. It's barely even noticing what's going on. Nothing quite out of the ordinary just yet. Anyways, you make your way forward and proceed through the factory, up an elevator, eventually finding your first tool/weapon, what we'll call the penis piston. Also, just a heads up, this game has a lot of innuendos and themes related to sex, so it makes sense once you've completed the game, and I promise you, I'm not just reaching here for a joke. Anyways, have you had the birds and the bees talk yet? Well, let me tell you how it works. So, you take your penis piston and insert it into the vaginal opening meant for that sort of equipment. Then, you just pump away, easy as pie, and in case you thought I was stretching for those sex jokes, here's another chode getting erect. I mean, look at this thing. That's a cock. So, you insert 3 mini chodes into a giant chode, and look at this thing, it's f***ing throbbing! And like a lot of us, not me, it burst way too early. Just absolutely covering you in, well, let's call it something with a milky white texture. After drowning in the sauce, awakening what seems to be some sort of a pod, you fall out of it and pull your own umbilical cord out. I mean, look at that. You stand up and realize the only other people around here are dead. So, you get to step in, my boy. You make your way across the landscape and you find your way back into the meat factory. Maneuvering through some corridors, you reach a room that looks eerily similar to the chode room, just a little different. Forebodingly, you also spot a monster crawling across the wall. Now that small squeal I made there at the end was actually exactly the same thing that I told my girlfriend when I first met her. You don't know this yet, but we're gonna be best friends. Continuing through the facility, you come across a structure mirroring a heart. Traveling through the ventricles, your heart stops and blood runs cold as you hear breathing above you. The monster from earlier is ready to make you his new best friend. He trust falls onto you and tries his very best to give you a firm but gentle hug. And look, attached to the parasite or symbiote, it's hard to tell, and you'll see why later, is the trusty penis piston. You continue along, clearing some arteries and finding rings for your collection, and after fighting 4, you're able to activate a machine and spend an hour on a puzzle, which I just realized also looks like a cock. Completing the puzzle also allows you to have a brand new Wii remote and a new inflatable spider pet, and as a final prize, you get to witness the miracle of birth. Oh, never mind. Walking through the corridors, it starts to get a little chilly, but you're relieved because your buddy decides to give you a little bit tighter of a hug. You head deeper into the factory, noticing that the walls are just a little wetter than they should be. Entering the main factory foyer, you notice odd growths absolutely everywhere, even creatures moving along the growths. But that's not going to stop you from putting your fingers in absolutely every hole you can find. You dirty, you dirty. Oh, gross. With the main elevator down, you move around the area completing more puzzles and find your first new enemies until you can fix the elevator. Once the elevator is fixed, it takes you to the epicenter of the outbreak. How do I know it's the center? Because of the giant abomination with tits in the middle of the room. Ah, that's not all that nasty, I hear y'all saying. Yeah, well, what if we just popped her titty like it's it? Anyways, you move around inside her until you piece together a puzzle. Doing so allows you to experience the joy Charlie felt whenever he was riding Willy Wonka's glass elevator. You also get to bring the gentle giantess with you. Also, once outside, you can actually spot the giant underneath the elevator, and it seems that with the ascent of the elevator that she was separated from her main body, but is surprisingly still alive. Finally at the top and about to take the tram to the Citadel, your best buddy continues to change and engulf you. Helpless, you're forced to sit and watch. Although it does eventually stop, you take the tram and you head towards the Citadel. Now here's where it gets just a little nasty. It appears that this civilization just straight up worships sex. Like, shit, this dude's hung as fuck. These dudes got it carved everywhere. Missionary, oral, booty. They even got this little area where the squad is inside the metaverse, while these dudes getting straight pumped. And I'm just standing there like, bro, I guess if everyone's doing it, then I gotta do it too. So I go on my little quest here in the Grand Citadel to find out how I too can be milked while chatting up the Zuck. Turns out, all you need is just a little baby fetus puree. Eagerly, I insert the main ingredients and hit go. But in order to properly make it, you need 2. This fetus tries to stop you, but if you just beat on his nutsack hanging out of the sides of his chassis, he'll tap out. Unfortunately, you also find out that to get in the Zuckerverse, it's only a one-man ride, so you've got to ask your friend to hop off. Now he gets just a little bit upset because they're a little clingy, so you just got to kind of hop in this neat machine, peel it off of you like picking a big old scab. Aw, look, he loves you. He's just a sweet little guy trying to give you a hug. That's sweet, but horrifying. So back to what I was saying, the claw machine peels off your little buddy, and it's supposed to hold him there. Now instead of them disposing of it the way that they probably should, it kind of gets away, but it shouldn't be an issue. So you just go back to find the Zug. Finally, you head back to the androids and insert the fetus juice. Doing so awakens these androids. These are going to be your caregivers whenever you're in the metaverse. Oh yeah, they do doggy too. Finally, it's yours. You hobble over to the ultimate gaming chair. Time to get strapped in, baby. Already knowing what's coming, this dude's already bricked up. Look at that, bro. No time wasted. Instant Hoover Deluxe. This man was legit just freeballing this entire time. Anyways, you turn to see not your hot android wives, but the priest coming for the clutch. He tells you can't wait to be inside you, and then just goes for it. Now, I'm pretty sure the arms are there to hold you for stability. I don't know why the knife is cutting the way that it is, but it's obvious to me that the saw takes off the skull cap specifically so that it could attach the Ethernet cable directly to your head. And just like that, you're linked up directly with the metaverse. Amazingly, the link allows you to directly control the two androids. You lift yourself up off the table and you send one android to the front in order to open the door, while the second android comes along to lift you up and give you the intimacy that your mom and dad never gave you. This android will carry you to the great beyond while tickling your tummy. So as you can see, in the background is the rift to the other dimension, and you, inside of this android body, are carrying yourself towards this gateway. I assume this is leaving the body behind and living forever in spirit and consciousness. But unfortunately, before you're able to get there, you look up to see your old friend. It's found its way to you and interrupts the process, disabling the android and forcing you back into your own body. You're too weak to try and fight off the monster. With no strength left in you, you succumb to its love. And as the game comes to a close, you fall unconscious, only to wake up to find out what's left of you. A writhing, wiggling mass of flesh, tendrils, bone, and sinew, and what appears to be the beginning of a new or same hive mind. In a poetic tragedy, you've been changed, reborn, not in spirit, but in body, forever. Alrighty, and that's gonna do it for the summary. Now that we're here, we could be just slightly more serious and discuss my theories. Don't worry, I promise this section will be shorter than the summary because honestly, this doesn't take a whole lot of explanation. So as far as theories, I have three major ones with proof to back up my claims. Theory 1, the two protagonists. If y'all were watching carefully, not only was the first person we meet the one who caused the outbreak, but was also the monster. Obviously you can see that protagonist 1 had the device on his hand as well as the penis piston. When switching over to protagonist 2, not only did we have to re-equip the wrist device, but we woke up somewhere else. Now I don't believe that the protagonist was actually the one in the driver's seat, if you know what I mean. Merely being overridden like cordyceps and ants. Once engulfed in the stuff, when he awakens, we see his point of view, but it's not him that's actually moving around. Now, that also implies that the virus doesn't immediately kill the host, but merely absorbs them over time. I think this holds true because in the final cutscene, we see both humanoids still aware and blinking, but unable to escape. I also feel that it was a reference to I have no mouth and I must scream, because our second protagonist literally had no mouth and was almost definitely internally screaming. Theory 2, the virus. Now, I say virus just because I don't really have anything else to call it. I've heard a couple people say taken over by corruption and things like that. I know IGN kind of said corruption, and a couple other YouTubers, when they were giving their reviews, were talking about some sort of corruption and whatnot. But I don't want to say corruption because that implies that it's malicious in some way. I'd say it was obvious this really was a normal thing to be working with, and the equivalent of Chernobyl happened. Basically, the virus was kept in check in order to create the bioorganics, but due to the meltdown that Protagonist 1 caused, it overran the facility. Now, I believe that the virus, in order to compensate, began finding areas in the facility that had organic matter, other aliens, and feeding off of them. We see in a few other different scenes that the main area where there's a lot of concentration of biomatter, and as well as the main hive mind, is around the pods that a lot of these aliens are being born out of. We know that they're being born out of because of the scene that we saw whenever we were inserting the key, and when we also got our spider. So I believe over time the mass just grew larger and larger, and like the hive mind in Halo, began to develop a centralized intelligence. Now, watching some of these enemies, they behave a little like ants in a hive. These spitters collect organic matter and connect with one another to transfer minerals and material throughout the entirety of the hive. It dawned on me when I killed one and I turned around to look at something else, and when I turned back around, it had tendrils reaching out in the same way that the walls did, trying to reconnect to one another. As well as when I came across the spitter with the open area on top of the head feeding into the veins on the wall. Now, these small chickens act as watchdogs for the hive, and I feel it's pretty obvious that the brutes protect the innermost areas of the hive mind. So in this way, personally, I believe we were not only witnessing the exodus of the civilization, but also the beginning of the hive mind. Now, theory 3, the timeline. Obviously, there's no exact way to tell just how much time goes between everything, but what I believe is that the civilization left much earlier than when the game takes place, and that we're just leftover people who were left behind. These pods on the wall could be long-term capsules, judging by the way you break out of them, and how an umbilical cord is connected directly to you, continuing to feed you nutrients. I think it's possible that the pods fed on organic material in that area, and that's also why there's nothing else alive in that area. Another thing that lends credence to this theory is that when you're the first humanoid and you're moving around in that factory, if you take a look around you, you can see that it's run down and empty. There are patches in the walls and parts missing here and there, so I feel it's safe to say that it's been some time since things were normally used and kept up with. I believe the civilization were so dependent on flesh and blood that they wanted a way to escape it. Hence the name of the game, Scorn. Scorn meaning the feeling or belief that someone or something is worthless or despicable. Contempt, meaning hatred. So I think they advanced their bioorganics so far that it took over everything, and they just did not want that. Again, they were so dependent on flesh and blood that they wanted to escape it. I think they discovered how to escape the body and to be reborn with just your mind. Also, rebirth, I feel, is a massive part of this game, and I also feel that's why the theme of sex is just so apparent. To be reborn into something new, and that something new to have been in spirit when instead being trapped forever by the flesh. Hence the ending when he's going towards that portal to try to get wherever else they're going, and it seems that he's actually out of his mind and somewhere else, and maybe ridding his body or something like that, when the monster comes along and disrupts that. And as I said, the tragedy where our protagonist is now stuck forever in a flesh prison. And that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I really hope that you all enjoyed and found it entertaining. This is the first time that I tried doing a video like this, but honestly, I really enjoyed it, and I think it works a lot better with my current schedule. I do like that it allows me to be more playful, and then while also being a little bit more serious towards the end. Just real quick on a personal note, in case nobody saw it in my community tab, but I want to apologize to my audience. And I lost my grandfather, my dog of 15 years, my aunt, and my grandmother all within the span of a few months, literally back to back. So I took a step away for a while, and every time I tried to come back, I would lose somebody new and sink back into that hole, and it was just so hard to be creative at that time. I did sincerely try to make a few more videos, and I would get maybe a minute into them and then just lose all motivation. So I do apologize for that and for not being more transparent on that. Although thankfully it seems that time of my life has passed, so I'm trying my best to get back and create more content, and I was super excited to get out here and do this today. So I thank all of those of you who are still here, and for those who are new, although we may stray close to the line and may even be tempted to fall, when the choice calls to be made, choose to defy it. A sincere thank you to everyone who stayed and watched, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks guys.